Right, so whilst polls are still saying the Tories are facing an extinction level event, as the media keep putting it, and Labour are on course for a massive majority as well, they're telling us in the same sentence, the reason for people to back Starmer in which case grows less and less, doesn't it? We're under less pressure to do so if we want the Tories out. But equally, having people to vote for representing Labour is becoming less and less too, as more people, many Labour all their lives, elected officials, Labour Councillors, find themselves unable to stomach representing what Labour has become under Keir Starmer. No longer for the many, but for the donors. No longer for peace, but instead for Israel and whatever they choose to do, it seems. No longer for fixing the country, just Tories in sheep's clothing, who will run the country in their own interests and continue the rot Sunak's brand of Tories leaves behind. People leaving the Labour Party and standing as independents or standing for the Green Party has become more commonplace. These are more common news stories, along with the stories of how they couldn't stand to be part of this Labour sham any longer, either being purged for pathetic reasons or putting their conscience first. But for 20 councillors to all resign at the same time from the same area, well, that's a level of rot Labour cannot sustain. When all of them cite Keir Starmer as their reason for quitting, well, it's clear where the problem lies, isn't it? Right, so not to get too far ahead of ourselves, it is now only just April, but looking ahead to local elections next month, given dissent happening in both Tory parties right now, both Tory parties, both the Conservative variety and the Labour ones is what I mean, yet more Labour resignations at local politics levels are occurring. The timing clearly giving such news more exposure, but Labour have been losing councillors for years, consistently. I've made many a video now on the reasons why, and 9 times out of 10 the name Keir Starmer gets dragged up. But when we've had maybe a handful of coordinated resignations from a similar given area previously, we've never had 20 quit in one go. But that is exactly what has just happened in the North West. A coordinated mass resignation involving councillors on Pendle Borough Council, Nelson Town Council and Briarfield Town Council, all in Lancashire. Some of the councillors involved on both the town and the Borough Council has taken place, all ahead of local elections happening in this area next month. Pendle Borough Council is a no overall control council, having formerly been Conservative majority held, and indeed the Conservatives form the largest party there still, though for how much longer is of course a matter for a lot of debate at the moment. But nevertheless, Labour are in deep trouble here too, and despite their national polling leads, they haven't done brilliantly at local election level for a while under Keir Starmer, last year being a classic example of the party having been lauded for making massive gains and taking this council and that council. But the media omitted to mention the huge losses and the councils they'd lost elsewhere in other areas too, meaning that overall, across the country, Labour as a party nationally in last year's locals largely just ended up treading water. The Tories, of course, had a mayor, and the Greens quadrupled their representation and took majority control of a council themselves for the very first time. It's not like there aren't other options to choose from. But stories like this show why Labour are in trouble as well as the Tories, and that those headline numbers betray the loss of local support, campaigners and the like that the authoritarian leadership of the party have driven away. But they're still bullish, aren't they? They still don't seem to care. Tory-esque as they are, they probably just fancy buying the advertising now these donors are coughing up cash, and campaigning having lost the word of mouth and the boots on the street, so to speak, so they'll have to pay for it instead. Lost in many cases to other smaller parties now benefiting from that experience. The training that treating people with dignity and respect wins them. Indeed, this is why much of the reasoning of these 20 councillors have all quit. It does come down to that. And well, that also happens to include the current leader of Pendle Borough Council, by the way. The reason they've given all stem from Starmer's leadership, and none are really anything new like that. It is how Starmer has been running Labour into the ground reputationally for years now. And he's not stopping when he thinks he's going to be rewarded for it by being waved into number 10. He's in for a shock when he discovers how hated he'll end up when he gets there, already widely disliked as he is, because that lead is built on disgust for the Conservatives, not praise for Labour. And that's a lead, that's power built on sand at the end of the day. The 20 councillors have described the direction the party has been taken in as draconian, certainly when it comes to policy. They have complained of having their free speech stifled, and that old favourite, that trademark move of the Starmer regime, especially when it comes to anybody remotely on the left, hindering them from standing for election. You haven't been using a non-voter by any chance up there, have you? So in summation, they're pretty disgusted with Starmer and their party now, for reasons a great many of us can relate to, and as a result are now forming independent groups on those councils. They're not planning on joining other parties, just standing as a brand new bloc, standing up for, dare I say it, the socialist ideals they might originally have joined the Labour Party for. Central to a lot of this bad feeling, though, you probably also won't be surprised to hear, is Gaza. Labour's position on Gaza is a mess. It can only ever go as far as the Israel lobby are prepared to stomach, and Starmer won't cross them for all the tea in China. With the ongoing genocide in Gaza showing no signs of stopping, especially with Israel right now seemingly deliberately targeting hospitals, it's left Al-Shifa in ruins, as is a big news story today, so as to destroy even more infrastructure needed there for civilized existence. This is going to be a hot topic on the doorstep even at local levels, and you're a fool if you believe otherwise, and more so amongst certain demographics. We've just had a by-election last month, won massively from Labour on a pro-ceasefire, pro-Gaza platform. George Galloway absolutely shredded the opposition and all the main parties. Israel's name is mud amongst large swathes of the British public, and when Labour Friends of Israel get such prominent placing in the media and on TV, and certainly in the Labour Party, that's a big problem at parliamentary level. But that has a knock-on effect too at local levels, when Starmer's support for Israel and those around is so prominent, and many people will not have forgotten how he shafted the SNP just a month ago and convincing the so-called, I say convincing, inverted commas, the so-called independent Speaker of the House of Commons, the weakling Lindsay Hoyle, to help him do that in allowing Labour's motion, which went against the standing orders on an opposition day. Going into this year's locals, I genuinely think Labour could be in trouble as well as the Tories. Again, wouldn't be first time. And when the polls are screaming about Labour supermajorities, that shouldn't be happening, should it? Yet here we are, 20 councillors resigning en masse. This is a picture we'll see repeated as April wears on, heading towards those May 2nd locals. I wouldn't bet against it. Pendle Borough Council has held debates on Gaza whether the leadership of the Labour Party likes it or not. They have voted for fresh calls for peace, humanitarian aid, a political solution to the genocide, and have even proposed a Homes for Palestinians scheme similar to the one that's run for Ukrainians. And why not? What makes Ukrainians different after all? All admirable things, I hope we would agree. All things I'm sure many of us would support, but they get none from the party. Several councillors have spoken up publicly following their resignations. Pendle Borough Council leader Asjad Mahmood has said, I, along with my colleagues, were elected by local residents to represent them in the council chamber. As a Labour councillor, I have always felt that the party's policies were aligned with my own beliefs and those of the constituents who have honoured me with their votes. Sadly, over a recent period, senior party officials have attempted to impose their ideas at local level. I was elected to serve the public, not party officials. Pendle Borough and Nelson Town Councillor Yvonne Tennant said, at a time when 14 years of Tory cuts are affecting local people across Pendle, the Labour Party leadership should be allowing local hard-working councillors the opportunity to challenge the Tories. Instead, colleagues are being hindered from fulfilling their roles. And Councillor Mohammed Iqbal, a former Borough Council leader himself, said, I was suspended from the party for 18 months before it was lifted in December 2023 for advocating on behalf of my constituents. I joined the Labour Party over 30 years ago and have always been encouraged to speak out on issues. However, senior figures within the party are attempting to stifle free speech and threaten dedicated councillors with removal as candidates. I, for one, cannot stand by and allow this to happen. The bullying needs to stop. You know what should give you an even bigger laugh here? Last week, Starmer was talking about pushing more power out to the regions if he gets elected to power. Passing that power out to, well, whom if everyone resigns on you in disgust, Buster? Besides, these people, these hard-working, experienced and dedicated councillors are having their rights trodden over, are treated with disdain and disgust now. And you expect us to believe you'd give these people more power later when you strip it away from them, as things stand at this moment in time, through diktat and authoritarianism? Pigs might fly. With the size of the porkers Starmer has a habit of telling, and the number of them to date, his flying pig would have to be bigger than a Boeing 747. Starmer can't even keep his elected officials on board, let alone meet your needs locally or nationally, and make good on the vote you might care to cast for his party. If he treats those who volunteer their time and effort for the party like this, who decide to stand for election and represent the party, thinking it chimes with their beliefs. What makes you think he'll give any more of a damn about your needs once he's had your vote? It's no wonder there are so many tales of vote rigging going on either, to get the right people that he wants in, or the regime wants, shall we say. If he's constantly threatening candidates and councillors with deselection, though, is it? And although you might be becoming more familiar with this anonymous voter scandal and the police investigation into Labour's online vote system, which they are still using, despite accusations of vote tampering, less well known is another similar scandal, this time using Labour's internal email system Organise. Find out all about that story here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.